Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out here bright and early, and for some people saying good morning back. Welcome to our ForeFlight forum presentation on the connected cockpit. My name's Cole Crawford. Glad to be here with you this morning. I'm a product manager at ForeFlight. I've also got a guest speaker up here with me. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm John Zimmerman, president of Sporty's, and I've worked with Cole a lot over the last few years on products like Sentry and Stratus and all kinds of other things, so I'll be adding a little outside perspective.
Yeah, John's very humble. I used to have our, what ratings we all have up on the slides, and I've stopped doing that because he has all the ratings and there's not enough room to fit all the different types of things he flies. I want to mention here our new product that we just launched last month, Sentry Plus. We'll talk a little bit about this here today. This is kind of an animation of what it looks like. We'll talk about some of the features in here. It'll be sprinkled in throughout. Just wanted to let you know that that's available at the show in our booth and at Sporty's booth. So, what are we actually here to talk about today? What's our agenda? Well, we're here to talk about connected cockpit, which is a pretty big platform, a pretty big thing to talk about. So we'll talk about what the purpose of a connected cockpit is, why you care about it. We'll talk about a number of select features that we're going to hit and how to use them and why you might want to use them. Then at the end, we're going to talk about how do you, okay, now you know all this information, how do I find the right solution for the type of flying that I want to do? What devices do I need? What iPads do I need? All that stuff. And then we'll leave time for Q&A. So my last housekeeping item that I'm going to mention is please write down your questions. We're going to have Q&A at the end, so I'd like you to hold your questions to the end, and we'll try our best to get to as many of your questions in the audience as we can at the very end. So let's get started. What is the purpose of a connected cockpit? Well, there's a number of things that you get out of it, but the main three reasons why you care about having a connected cockpit is number one, situational awareness. ForeFlight, like we mentioned, is a pre-flight planning tool and an in-flight situational awareness tool. There's lots of things that you're going to not know that you didn't know by just having these devices and having access to this information in flight. The second is redundancy. You hear redundancy talked about in an aviation safety context all the time. It's important to know which of your systems are redundant and which systems are not redundant and what your level of risk is as a result of those decisions. And we'll talk about how you can introduce certain types of data and connectivity in your flying to help give you some redundancy and lower your risk. And the third thing we're going to talk about as a main purpose is fatigue reduction. There's a lot of classic examples of this, but when you know a lot more information up front and in a visual and easy to consume context, your brain doesn't have to work as hard to do some things, and that leaves more room in your head for flying the airplane and staying safe. So the first select feature that we want to talk about, this is the one that everybody knows, GPS. So ForeFlight, if you're not familiar, is a moving map. At its heart, that's the main core feature that people love and have come to love. And one of the things that we do is we show your present position on a moving map on the iPad. So here you can see the airplane is highlighted there in red. And this seems like a really simple feature, but it's really important. Before you had a moving map, you had to look at an old paper chart and figure out, okay, where am I on this thing? And constantly in your brain understand, where am I on here? Whereas now, you can set the map to north up or track up and see everything around you relative to your current position. It's much easier to consume things like weather, other traffic. You can consume things like airmets and sigmets that way. It's much easier to understand when you can see your present position on a map. That's kind of taken for granted. Most people know this about ForeFlight already, but the second thing that many people don't know about is we have something called cockpit instruments, and you can set up which cockpit instruments you want. You see it there on the bottom. And many of those cockpit instruments are powered by your GPS chip. If we don't know where you are and how fast you're moving and how high above the earth you are, we can't do most of these things. So this is a really important feature that people love, is just having these quick to look at cockpit instruments on the bottom there. The next thing that you get out of GPS is our geo-referenced plates. Now in this context, if any of you are instrument pilots, you might be familiar with this. So geo-reference plates, I just want to mention, is in our Pro Plus plans and above. So what that means is we can show the plate on our moving map with your airplane on it in the correct position referenced, which is really nice when you're flying those instrument procedures, especially ones with lots of step downs and all kinds of other things, so that you can see exactly where you are on the plate. That's also nice because you don't have to switch to another screen to look at the plate and back and forth. It can always be on the same context that you're doing there to help lower your fatigue. Oftentimes when I present this feature, people say, well, I'm a VFR-only pilot, so this, it's great, it's cool, but it doesn't really give me any value. But there's lots of things that VFR pilots get out of georeference plates as well. Here's a taxi diagram at my home airport, which has a lot of taxiways. You can also get georeferenced plates for the taxi diagrams as well, which all pilots need to taxi. That's very, very useful. So John, why don't we talk a little bit about how you can use this and how this can give you some extra redundancy with what you might already have in your aircraft.
Yeah, this is the most overlooked feature. We all take it for granted we have GPS, but it does unlock so many things. I mean, this is a great example of if I'm at a busy airport I haven't been to and I get told, you know, taxi to 36 center via Alpha, left on Bravo 2, right on Bravo, left on Charlie 2. You know, stop. That's where you can turn on the annotations feature here, and what I do is I'll just draw as they, instead of writing, I'll just draw it. Okay, Alpha, Bravo 2, Charlie, draw your taxiway, and then with the georeferencing, I just follow the red line, and it makes it a lot easier at a new airport or low visibility if you're an IFR pilot. I had this once, landed at a big airport, and I couldn't see the FBO I was going to because it was 200 and a half, and it was 2 miles away, and I needed that taxi diagram to get there. The other thing I think Cole points out that we'll probably reference multiple times today is it's really, these features when they're used together is where the power gets unlocked. So GPS is a great example. Having radar in flight, great, but having radar in flight and then my position and then my route is so much more powerful because then I can really plan my way around it. So GPS to me is the feature that enables so many of these other things. And one of those that I think a lot of people overlook is fuel planning. If you're in a long cross country, that GPS and specifically those cockpit instruments at the bottom, those are your best friend because you should be constantly running new calculations for your fuel and endurance. And when you have a real-time ETE in the bottom and a real-time ground speed, that's your friend. So I always use it not just for weather, but for those fuel calculations.
Yeah, great stuff there, John. Yeah, like I said earlier, this is a very underappreciated and overlooked feature of the app, but it's core to everything else that the app does. All these other features we're going to talk about, you need GPS to really get the true value out of them. So how do I get GPS? Well, most people that are ForeFlight users do have access to GPS, but I want to talk about the basic ways you can get them. There's 3 primary ways to get GPS position on your iPad. Number 1, if you have a cellular enabled iPad. Number 2, a portable GPS. And number 3, connecting to your aircraft GPS. So cellular iPads, we'll talk about the pros and cons. So you don't need to have the cellular service enabled on your iPad. You just need to purchase an iPad that has a cellular chip in it. Apple only puts the GPS chips in the iPads that have the cellular chip. So you don't need to pay for the service, but just make sure the iPad you buy, if you want to have a cellular enabled, or if you want to have a GPS chip in your iPad, is a cellular one. The advantage to doing that, as opposed to going with a different solution, is that it's entirely self-contained. So everything else can go wrong, your panel can go out, your Wi-Fi can go away, but you will still have GPS on your iPad. That's the advantage. It's entirely self-contained. There's nothing else to fuss with, nothing else to worry about. Your next option are portable GPS units. I'm putting a little plug up here for our line of GPS products. These are called the Sentry, but there's other portable GPS units out there as well. The advantage here with these devices are they're totally independent from the aircraft. So if you have an electrical failure on your panel and now you don't have GPS in your airplane, you still have GPS from your Sentry or whatever portable GPS device you choose to use, which gives you a lot of redundancy like we've talked about. The other advantage of this over the iPad GPS is the WAAS level position accuracy. So these 3 devices that we're showing up here on the screen have WAAS capable GPSs. So you're going to see single meter GPS precision, which is really nice, especially when you're on approaches. And it's really nice when you're taxiing around an airport because if you think about how wide a taxiway is, it's not that wide. So if you have if your iPad only has 20 meter position accuracy, it might show you on one side of the taxiway or the other, but not actually on it because we don't have that level of precision. This gives you that level of precision. The third advantage is some of these devices, like the 3 on the screen, are multi-constellation GNSS devices. What that means, effectively, like what the value proposition is as a user of these products, is that you have a GPS chip that is both jam resistant and spoof resistant. So if you're not familiar with this whole concept, if you've been looking at NOTAMs recently over the last couple of years, you might have noticed that there's more of these planned GPS jamming exercises going on all over the United States, Specifically, the western half of the United States is more prevalent near a lot of military bases. But there's also unintentional GPS jamming that happens for a number of reasons. And if you happen to fly an airplane through one of those exercises or through an unplanned GPS jamming situation, then your airplane will go into dead reckoning and it will not know where it is. These devices are jam resistant because they're multi-constellation and they will just move over to another system. And that will give you down to the meter accuracy even during a GPS jamming exercise. Here's a quick demonstration of that. Somebody on Twitter, they're flying a TBM 940, which last I checked is a pretty expensive airplane with a pretty nice cockpit there. And he says that White Sands was jamming GPS today, causing all the airliners to ask for vectors from ATC. And my panel went down too, but ForeFlight was good with the Sentry, and I still had 1 meter of accuracy and 0 problems navigating. So it's a great extra piece of backup kit there that gives you some redundancy. The third option is you can connect ForeFlight directly to your aircraft's GPS. This is really interesting, and a lot of people do this. The great thing about this is then you know that your iPad is showing the exact same spot as whatever your panel is showing, because it's all the same data, the same source. The downside to this situation is, like I said, you don't get redundancy out of that, because if you had an electrical failure, now you've lost it on both your plane and your iPad. But you can do things like pair to your panel and then have your Sentry or your cellular enabled iPad as a backup. That way it fails over to the other thing, and then you can kind of build that in that way. So John, which pairwise comparison do you use? Like what do you actually connect to for GPS?
Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I'm actually, I don't have a cellular iPad. I'm like, I guess I'm just cheap or something, but the real answer is I'm always flying with something else. So I typically will have a Sentry on the window, but a couple of the airplanes I fly have the Garmin Connects. One has a Flightstream 510, one has a GTX 345 transponder. And so that to me is the best of both worlds. Like Cole said, I've got in sync with the panel, which is great. It's bang on. It's basically a representation of the panel on my iPad. But if something goes wrong, you know, panel goes dark or what happened there with GPS jamming, I've got a backup. So I like to do both of those because without GPS, I've had that dead reckoning. I had it in an Aztec in IFR, and it's not a good feeling. And in that case, it only lasted about a minute, but it's really not a good feeling if you're, in this case, I was descending kind of on a base leg for an instrument approach, and it went dead reckoning. That's not a good feeling at all. So this is an area I've really got serious about backup on.
The next thing we want to talk about is traffic here. Many of you are probably familiar with this. ForeFlight shows traffic on the iPad. We have 3 types of traffic targets that we can show you. There's 3 contexts in which you can find traffic. The first, and probably what you're all familiar with because it's been a big buzzword over the last couple of years in the industry, is ADS-B. ADS-B traffic, we support that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. The other 2 types of traffic that you'll see in the app are FLARM traffic. That's picking up in popularity. I'll explain that specifically here in a little bit. And the third type of traffic is what we call our internet traffic product. And that is available only while you're on the ground for like a pre-flight planning context. I'm going to hit that one first. So internet traffic we launched, I believe now, almost 2 years ago, I think. I'm trying to remember when we actually launched this. So we take traffic from FlightAware and show it to you on our moving map. And that only works while you're at home connected to the internet. It's not something you can or should use while in flight. But it's really great for things like situational awareness, pre-checking at home. You can quickly find out, okay, which runway is my home airport on right now? What approach are people flying at a particular airport? I like using it for if you see a huge line of storms and you want to find out, before you even take off, which way is ATC diverting people around some system that's out there, all that kind of stuff. It's really great for those types of use cases. The next one is FLARM traffic. I hinted at this a second ago. FLARM is another traffic air-to-air traffic protocol. It's more popular in Europe than it is here in the United States, but I'm going to mention it a little bit. So it's often installed on gliders and those kinds of things, smaller aircraft, and you can pick those signals up. There's a few devices that support them. If you check out our buying guide, which I'll point you to later, you can see what all devices support FLARM. You need to have a FLARM receiver to receive that information and connect it to your iPad. Most of the time with those devices, they require that you have a FLARM decoding license, as FLARM is a for-profit company, so they have to keep the lights on and make some money there, and you can purchase that decoding license at foreflight.com/buy. Now the big one that everybody knows about, or at this point most people know about it, is ADS-B traffic. So ADS-B traffic, we'll talk about what all devices support that. There's a number of different portable and installed receivers that exist for ADS-B traffic in the air. The big thing to know is that the way ADS-B works is it's broadcast over two frequencies. There's the 1090 megahertz frequency and there's the 978 megahertz frequency. It depends on which kind of transponder you have. So it's important that you want to have a dual band receiver so that you can receive traffic that are broadcasting on both frequencies, so you have the whole traffic picture that you can get. Just another note, if you ever hear somebody say the word UAT, they're talking about 978 megahertz. That's kind of the other exchange word you hear there. So the guys at Sporty's put together these lovely graphics and scenarios about what kind of traffic you will and won't see, and I'm going to let John hit that.
Yeah, so this gets a little complicated, but hopefully some of this sounds familiar if you've been around the ADS-B world a little bit. First of all, how many people have ADS-B out in an airplane they fly, like a tail beacon, a sky beacon, a GTX 345? Awesome. So the good news for all of you is it's fairly simple. If you have ADS-B out in your airplane, you have a pretty complete traffic picture. Because the way ADS-B traffic works versus weather, weather is just an AM radio. It just broadcasts weather, and all you do is tune in the frequency and you get weather. Traffic's a little different. It's more like a text message. You get traffic information back when you transmit out. So for all of you with ADS-B out, you're going to have a fairly complete traffic picture, which I'll show you here in a second. If you don't have ADS-B out, you can still get some traffic information from a portable receiver, say. It's just limited. And so it's limited in a couple ways. We'll do three scenarios here. The first scenario, in this case, we've got, say, a Sentry on the side window. We're using ForeFlight, but we don't have ADS-B out. And in this case, we don't even have an ADS-B ground station. Maybe we're flying at low level out west. Maybe we're in Canada where there are no ADS-B ground stations. In this case, the only airplanes you're going to see are other aircraft that have ADS-B out. They're transmitting in the blind, and so you can pick up their traffic information. So that's great. In this case, you know, we don't even have a ground station, but we can still see that Baron up there because it's transmitting out, and we have an ADS-B receiver, so we see it. Obviously, the problem is we don't see that Pilatus over there because he's just got a Mode C transponder. He doesn't have ADS-B out, so we're blind to him, and we don't know we're blind to him. So this is one of these scenarios where you need to be a little bit paranoid. If you're not flying in range of a ground station or if you're not flying with ADS-B out, you don't know what you don't know. We'll go to the next one. Things are a little bit better. In this case, we still don't have ADS-B out in our airplane, but we've got that portable, and now we're both in range of a ground station, and we're kind of close to another airplane with ADS-B out. So what happens is that ground station transmits what we call the hockey puck, a hockey puck of traffic centered not on us, but on the ADS-B out airplane. So for all of you who have ADS-B out, you're that Baron in the middle. You're getting all that traffic within 30 miles and 7,000 feet. Perfect. However, if it's me and I'm cheap over here and I don't have ADS-B out, I can still get some of that traffic because I'm in your hockey puck. So I get that other 172 over there. Great. He doesn't even have ADS-B out, but I still see him. The problem is we're getting traffic information for that Baron's hockey puck, not my hockey puck. So look, that Pilatus is still lurking out there and we don't know about it. So again, this situation, this is what you'd probably see most of the time. You'd have a ground station. You'll see a lot of traffic. But just remember, it's still not complete. You go to scenario 3 here. Now I finally got off my rear end. I got ADS-B out in my airplane. Now the hockey puck is centered on me. So now I'm going to see everything within 30 miles and 7,000 feet. The only thing you won't see is an aircraft without a transponder. So if it is a glider, say, that's where it's nice to have a FLARM receiver. Or if it's an antique airplane with no electrical system, no transponder, you still won't see them. So you can't be totally asleep. But you're going to see 98% of traffic in this case. So I know that's painful a little bit, but the good news is most of you have equipped with ADS-B out. So for you, you're living here, you're going to see an almost complete traffic picture.
Great explanation there, John. So we want to talk about some of the context in the app in which this is valuable. So A, you probably all know you can see, like I've shown earlier, traffic targets on the map and their little green icons. Great, and we'll talk more about that. The other thing I want to mention though is that we also show you traffic alerts. Hopefully you never see one. However, we do show these to you. So you can see on the left screen here, that traffic target started getting kind of close to me and we turned it yellow. Well, eventually, if it gets too close to you, then we will show it as a red traffic target, and then we'll show you a visual alert and speak an audible alert to you. And you can see an example of that on the top right where we say traffic, 11 o'clock, 2 nautical miles, 1,000 above. I want to explain briefly how this works. This is all rate-based. So we do take into account that there are fast movers out there. So it's not just a dumb like puck around you. We actually figure out how many seconds away they are from colliding with you. And what will happen is if they are within 45 seconds of being a threat to you, then we will color them yellow. Once they're within 25 seconds of being a threat to you, then they go red and you see an alert. So when you see an alert, it means you have 25 seconds to do something, is effectively what that means. Now, traffic alerts are great, and they're a great situational awareness tool to keep you from a bad situation. But there's also lots of other things that you can use traffic for as far as situational awareness that most people overlook entirely. This is what I'm showing you as ground targets here. So in the app, you're on an airport surface here, kind of what John mentioned earlier. You can see where the other airplanes are taxiing because we show them as ground targets. This is really useful if you're an IFR pilot on a low-vis day and you can't see the other traffic very well. You can see them on your moving map. Even if you're not an IFR pilot or the weather's clear in a million, what's nice is if you ever go into a larger airport, you can see pretty quickly what is the route, the taxi route that they're giving most people from this FBO, so that you can kind of mentally in your mind prepare and say, okay, he's about to give me 17 left, Lima, Bravo, or whatever it happens to be. This is my home airport, so I know that's what he's going to give me. But there's lots of situational awareness tools here. The other one I like to mention is think about using traffic for things in flight that aren't even near you. You can get traffic targets hundreds of miles away sometimes. And why that's useful is way before you get to the airport that you're landing at, you're trying to stay in front of the airplane. You can look and see, oh, they're all flying left base for 17, or they're on this pattern, or they're going down this approach. Or the other one that John and I talk about all the time is a great weather tool is actually traffic. If you see a system and you want to figure out how to avoid it, you can just look for where are all the other airplanes going around. Like, are they going south around the system? Are they going north around the system? Is there some hole that they're all going through? And you can use that as a context to listen for certain tail numbers if you want when you're talking to ATC. John, you have any other good examples of how you use it?
Yeah, I just echo that. You don't want to blindly follow another pilot, but it's a clue at least. It's a place to focus on. And I've done that, what you said, listening. I'll maybe flying up and there's a line, but there's a pretty good gap. And I'm, can I get through there? I can't quite see it yet. But if you see 3 airplanes in front of you go through, I'll just ask ATC, hey, can you ask, November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who just went through, how was the ride? I can see he was only 1,000 feet above me, so it's not, an airline at 39,000 feet. It works real well, and the ATC usually is very accommodating. They'll just ask, sure, hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how was your ride through that line? Oh, no problem, we were on top. Well, for me, that's gold. That's a pilot report that didn't exist. I can't find it, but because I saw the traffic, I could ask the right question. So I've used that cheat code all the time now.
Yeah, I've actually had that happen to me, but in reverse, where I was shooting an instrument approach at a particular airport in South Carolina, and another airplane diverted because they went missed from some other airport, and they asked ATC, and they said, hey, I see such and such tail number, looks like they're shooting an approach at Greenwood. Can you ask them if it's clear or if it's above Mins or all that, and if they make it? And then ATC comes over and says, hey, can you let me know if, as soon as you know, kind of thing. All really interesting. We can help each other out if we know roughly what's happening in the situation just by looking at just by looking at ADS-B traffic. The other thing I want to point you to, I've been mentioning it, is our buying guide. So there's lots of different ADS-B devices that we support, and I'm not going to hit them all here. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you to our buying guide. We'll have a link to it later so that you can see it all, but you can also get one in our booth. And on pages 8 through 10 of the buying guide is where we show you a nice little diagram that tells you here's all the devices that will give you ADS-B in, and you can look at which one makes the most sense for you. Let's move on to some weather here. So the first thing is, very often when people come up to me in the booth or another context, or you'll hear people say, oh, I don't have the weather, or I want weather. And very often people think radar is weather. And I want to first start off this whole section about saying that in-flight weather is a lot more than just radar. Radar is like one piece of the puzzle that you should put together with all the other things that we're going to talk about to really understand what's happening in the atmosphere. However, Next-Rad radar is really cool, and it's very visual, and it's very easy to consume, so we're going to talk about that for a second. So here's an image of my iPad at some point, and you can see the Next-Rad radar from ADS-B on the iPad here. There's a number of different ways you can get Next-Rad radar on flight, and we're going to talk about that in a second. The thing to know about Next-Red radar over FISB is that there's two different types. There's regional, so you have basically the ground stations broadcast all the radar around them, and then you also have CONUS radar, which is a lower resolution image of the whole country, of what radar is going on hundreds and hundreds of miles away. Next one on here, we're not going to hit every single layer that's available via data link, but we're going to talk about a few of them. I really like this one, especially in my airplane. My ceiling's 14,000, so I want to know, can I actually get above this layer if I'm IFR or not? And basically what this product does is called Cloud Tops, is it shows you whether the tops are above you or not. So you can figure out pretty quickly, is this something I can actually get over, or am I going to be in IMC for the next couple hours? Next one is PIREPS. Do not overlook this one. PIREPS are really the only in-flight weather product that is a report from an actual pilot in the actual atmosphere around you. So this is a very valuable feature. Almost everything else is either automated or it's a forecast, whereas this is an actual report from a human being about what's going on. And here you can see them on the map. One of the really cool things about PIREPS via ADS-B or via any data link method is it's really fun when you report a PIREP for the first time, or for how many ever times you've done it, and then a few minutes later you see your own PIREP show up back on the map. That's kind of cool. Next one is METARs. We'll talk about METARs and TAFs. You can get these via data link. Don't overlook these. There's a lot of value in METARs. You can look at what are all the airports in front of me, and the other thing you can do is in flight you can follow the trend of METARs. You can see, did that METAR just go from green to blue to red? Is it about to go pink? You can follow what is actually happening as you progress along your flight. So I'm going to talk about some quick weather tips here. I'm going to just hit a few of these. So the first is, and I think John, this is one of your things that you mention all the time, is when you use data link weather, it should really be a strategic thing and not a tactical thing. You should make big picture decisions with data link weather. There is some delay to the radar. Not everything is perfect either. The design of it is to be that you're not trying to pick between a tiny little hole. You're trying to make large strategic decisions about going around systems, figuring out which way you're going to divert, those kinds of things. It's not a replacement if you're going to need to do things like that for onboard radar. That's a totally different animal. The next one I mentioned again is don't get sucked into the trap of just using radar. There's a lot more to weather than just radar. So use all these things together to figure out what's happening. The next one is use your eyes. Your eyes are the best weather tool that you have in your toolkit. So don't just look at what the iPad says and take that for gospel. Confirm what you see on the iPad outside. And John, I think you call this calibrating your eyes. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I think a lot of people occasionally let an iPad talk themselves into doing something they don't want to do. And really the radar picture, the METARs, the PIREPS is a great first piece of information, but you want to confirm it with your eyes. And this is a great thing to do on every flight, even if the weather's good. I'm a big believer in using this on all your flights because you get to practice. And you get to practice saying, okay, that line of rain out there is 100 miles away. It doesn't affect my flight. But here's what it looks like on radar, and here's what it looks like out the window. And you get good at sensing, okay, yellow, is yellow always bad? Well, yellow, if it's those really sharply defined cumulus clouds that look like they're billowing up, those are bad. But yellow, if it's just a thin layer of stratus, well, that's just rain, and that's a free airplane wash. And you want to get beyond just, green good, red bad with radar, and your eyes is really a great way to do that, I think. Eyes plus pilot reports and other things. It's really, that second one there, stack all of those layers together. A lot of people I see, they go read a METAR, and that's okay, but you really want to turn on the METAR map, get a sense for, is it just that airport that's bad, or is it the whole area that's bad? What does the METAR say underneath that red cell on radar? Is it actually raining? It's just a matter of putting all those pieces together. And at the end of the day, even I fly a lot of IFR, but my weather avoidance strategy, IFR, is stay visual. If it's an ugly looking cloud, I'm going to deviate regardless of what's on the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, I'll also, like I mentioned earlier, like to combine things that have nothing to do with weather into my weather picture. Like I mentioned, you can use internet, or you can use ADS-B traffic to combine that and figure out, okay, what's happening, what are other airplanes doing, and that's just all adding to your overall picture. You can also talk to air traffic or talk to other pilots and say, hey, you're 20 miles in front of me. What do you see? What's going on? And just add in.
And one other public service announcement, give PIREPS if the weather's good. A lot of us fall in the trap of, oh, I got ice, so I'm going to give a pilot rep, or that ride was terrible, I'm going to give a pilot rep. Sometimes the most valuable pilot report is, actually it was a smooth ride and we were on top and we got no ice. That's really helpful if I'm following you or if I'm on the ground trying to plan a flight and maybe I look at the radar and it looks really nasty. But if I see that you went through there 40 minutes ago in a 182 and it was a great ride, that's very helpful. So don't only give pilot reports if the weather's bad. It's perfectly okay to say, ATC, you got time for a quick pilot rep? 8,000 feet on top, smooth ride, no ice, temperature +4. That is incredibly valuable for a pilot following you.
Awesome. Pay special attention to the last updated time. ForeFlight will always show you when was the last time that we updated that thing. So when was the last time the METAR updated? When was the last radar image provided? So you know this image that I'm looking at is however many minutes old. I know the last time I got cloud tops. I know the last time I got anything. That's really important, right? You want to make sure you know when this thing applied, like when that counted, right? That's really important. Very last one, again, this is stuff that you should, kind of to John's point about calibrating your eyes, you should go and calibrate your eyes on a good VFR day. You should go up and fly, look at the iPad, look at the weather, look at the iPad, look at the weather. Like do that all before, try to do as much of it as you can. Like unfortunately you can't really familiarize yourself with ADS, particularly ADS-B weather while at home because on the ground you're not going to receive ADS-B weather. But go up on a good VFR day and try to get a sense of that and start that calibration process in your mind and learn how to use the different layers and spend some time in an environment that is safe. So now moving on to, okay, this is all really cool. How do I get to this? How do I get in-flight weather? So there's two main primary types of in-flight weather sources as far as data link goes. The first is FISB, stands for Flight Information Service Broadcast. That's actually the official name. When you hear people say ADS-B weather, they're actually talking about FISB, Flight Information Service Broadcast. It's actually not just weather, it also includes NOTAMs and some other things as well. The other source is SiriusXM. I am not going to be able here today to cover every minute difference between the two products, but I'll try to hit a kind of a quick list of things to be aware of. So to get ADS-B weather, or FISB, if that's what you choose to use, there's a number of portable receivers. That's an option. The ones we mentioned earlier, those are portable ADS-B receivers as well. You can also get them from installed ADS-B in transponders. So some transponders also receive ADS-B, and in which case you can connect to them and get that picture on your iPad as well. The other option is SiriusXM. That's another data link product. That's satellite based. They have a number of portable XM receivers that you can purchase that connect to ForeFlight. Again, I'll point you to the buying guide. The only thing to know about is XM is, again, a for-profit company, so they do require a subscription, like some kind of annual subscription that you pay for, and that unlocks that weather that you can get. Here's a chart of the main differences between them as far as what products are available. The big things to know is about availability and cost. So FISB comes from ground towers, whereas SiriusXM comes from satellites, which the nice thing is if you have SiriusXM, you will get that information while you're sitting on the ground before you take off, whereas with ADS-B, you have to get off the ground and get in range of a ground station. Coverage area, FISB now covers all of the United States, including Hawaii and Alaska, plus Puerto Rico and Guam. XM is US and Canada. The other big one is your taxpayer dollars pay for FISB, so you don't have to pay anything in addition for it. You just have to have a receiver that receives it, and you're good to go from there. XM, like I mentioned, does come at a cost. Here's all the rest of the differences. There are some, not only do they have a lot of the same products, but there are some differences between the same product across these things. Like for example, the NEXRAD image looks a little different from FISB and SiriusXM. So there's a deep dive on that online that covers all the minutia of things, and I think, John, you usually cover a little bit more than I am covering here. Next thing we want to talk about is flight plan transfer. This is one of my favorite things to use on cross countries. So what is flight plan transfer? Well, all flights should, right, they all should start with flight planning. So here we are in the flights part of the app. This is an IFR flight, but you also do flight planning for VFR flights. You'll pick your departure, your destination, and your time, the aircraft you're using. You'll plan the route out. Looks like here I was planning a flight from somewhere in Texas to, I think that is Taos Ski Valley. So there's a lot of terrain there. The route is not very straight. a lot of Victor Airways and things going on there. You plan that all out, you brief the flight, you look at your nav log. Now you go out to the plane, and you now have the lovely experience of having to type in all the waypoints and the Victor Airways and all that stuff into your flight plan on your panel. Well, not anymore with flight plan transfer. That's the main thing that we do here. So what you can do is you've got this flight here, you get on the airplane, you turn your avionics on, and you press that little Send To button in the top right corner there. It's highlighted in red, and we'll show you a menu that looks like this. And you press that button that says Panel right there. What's going to happen is when you press that button and you're connected to your aircraft's panel, we're going to send the flight plan to your panel. And I'm going to use Garmin here as an example because we have to have a panel. This is my GTN 750. And you can see here you'll have a message show up in your message drawer if you're familiar with that, but they all effectively work the same way, right? You'll have a new message. We'll say, hey, we have a new flight plan. Do you want to activate this? Do you want to use it? Or do you want me to ignore it? It's not going to just use some random flight plan from ForeFlight without you explicitly saying, yes, I do want to change my flight plan to this. So you look at it here, you can see this is what the flight plan is saying. This is what I got from ForeFlight. Is this really what you want to do? And you can store it if you want to activate it later. Most people will do what they do is they just press activate. And that's going to activate it on your panel. So the next screen that you'll see is, here's my flight plan, and it matches what's in ForeFlight. This is awesome, especially when you've got a ton of those Victor Airways and lots of stuff to enter. It can take a long time to get it in there, whereas this way, you just walk on, you press 2 buttons, now your panel matches your iPad and you're ready to rock. It also shows up in a few other contexts in the app that I'm going to mention. Sometimes, like especially when I'm doing VFR flight planning, I usually will do a lot of that planning on the map, right? Just directly on the maps page, and that's what I'm doing here. I was going out to a little state park and then going over to Llano for some barbecue. I'll give a little plug. There's a great barbecue restaurant in Llano, Texas. Would recommend. Anyway, you got the plan here, and that's actually a custom user waypoint I created. So you can press that same little button I showed you earlier. It looks like a little airplane with the little brackets around it. You press that, and we say, hey, do you want to send this map to the panel, this flight plan to the panel, or do you want to load from the panel? So you press the Send To panel, and you'll get the exact same flow happen on your panel. The other option, you can load from the panel, just like I said. So you press that button there, and then you can press the Load From Panel button, and we'll pull whatever's in your panel and pull it onto the iPad. If for some reason you did some of that planning there, or maybe you amended the flight plan because ATC gave you a different route, you want to pull something that's on the panel, pull it back. The other thing I want to point out is this little button here that says Auto Receive From Panel. So that's usually defaults to on. You can turn that on or off. What that does, if you have that turned on, is if you have that turned on and you make a change on the panel, let's say you remove a waypoint because ATC gave you a more direct route, or you decided you didn't want to stop somewhere or whatever. When you make that change on your panel, the panel is going to send ForeFlight a message and will automatically change it for you on the map without you having to intervene or press load from panel or do anything. It'll just stay in sync, which is really nice. This is what that looks like here. You'll see anytime we do that, we tell you that we've done it, so it's not like mysterious why this changed. We'll show new flight plan loaded from panel. So John, there's a lot of different ways people use this. This is one of those ones I think you mentioned earlier where using this with other things, with GPS, with weather, gets really powerful. So why don't you tell me how you use it in flight?
Yeah, I use it in flight a lot. Cole mentioned the pre-flight, which is the complicated IFR route, which is great. But in flight with weather, this to me is the best way to do deviation. So I find weather deviation planning much easier on the iPad than the panel. Now, even if I've got some really nice looking glass cockpit, it's just harder usually. So I will, if I've got a long cross country and there's a big blob of weather, I'll get on ForeFlight, and honestly I'll often just use that rubber band tool where you tap and hold the course line and basically drag it until it's clear of the weather. I mean, this is, weather deviation 101. Drag it till it's clear, and maybe I'll have to do that a couple times to kind of do a little, banana-shaped contour there. And what I'll do is I'll just pick a couple waypoints, maybe an airport or a VOR or an intersection, and then once I've got kind of the perfect route that visually goes around that system, well, instead of having to go on the panel and type in all these waypoints or lat longs even, I can just go and send it to the panel and it's automatically there. It saves a ton of time. It's great with ATC too because I can plan it all out, and then instead of having to have a 10-minute conversation with ATC when they're busy. You just say, hey, I'd like to update my flight plan. I want to go direct here, then direct destination to keep me clear of the weather. ATC loves it because they can put it in their computer and now they know what to expect. And it's easier for me because I'm not constantly negotiating for 10-degree deviations left and right. I just miss the whole thing. And with the Connects like that, it's so simple just to update your flight plan right from the panel. So I do keep it in sync a lot of times where the panel is pushing it to my iPad, but for a big weather deviation, I do it the other way and send from the iPad up to the panel.
Yeah, I love this for the weather deviations where I just no longer ask for the whole dance of I want 10 left and then, oh, actually I meant 20 left and then, oh, I actually meant more than that left, right? Yeah, it just gets way out of control. The thing to mention here, I want to come back to the whole purpose of a connected cockpit. This particular feature really falls underneath the fatigue category. This is a feature, especially when you're in these situations where you're already thinking about weather and what's your flight plan, talking to ATC and doing so many things. The last thing you want to do is have to keep your iPad in sync with your panel and change things all over the place. Having this just happen for you is a huge reduction in workload, so you can keep scanning your instruments and keep flying the airplane, and it makes things much smoother. The other thing is, if you live in a state that's hotter like I do, it's really nice to not have to spend 30 minutes typing in a flight plan in 100-degree weather on the ground in a enclosed cabin aircraft. It's not particularly pleasant, so you can kind of bypass that whole step with this. So, all great. How do I get flight plan transfer? Well, you need to find out if your FMS that you have or your IFR Navigator is compatible with what we offer in ForeFlight. The way to do that is to look at our buying guide. Again, I'm going to go back to that. There's the link to the buying guide, but if you don't have to worry about writing it down, I have a little QR code at the very end of the presentation, which will take you right there on your phone, so you don't feel like you need to write it down. But it's pretty easy to remember, foreflight.com, buying-guide-PDF. Pages 9 and 10 will talk specifically about flight plan transfer and which panels can do this feature with ForeFlight. Next one, this is again, this is a real big redundancy topic, but ForeFlight, many people don't know, has an attitude indicator in our app. Here's what it looks like here. It's not just attitude, but we can also do something called synthetic vision. So this image here shows you the runway in context. So you can sort of see the color coding of the terrain. You can see obstacles. You can see traffic in synthetic vision as well, so that you can actually see where they would be. It's kind of like looking through the clouds, sort of. You can see the runway there, and you can see that it looks like I'm going to make it in this context. And what's really interesting is it split screens like this. So I use this feature often on approaches because what I want to have is when I look, if I need to look down away from my instruments to look at the approach chart, even though I'm not staring at the attitude indicator here on the app, it's still easily within my frame of reference, within my peripheral vision there while I'm looking at the approach chart, and that drastically reduces my fatigue because when I look up, I'm not like disoriented already, because just looking down and trying to steady an approach chart and then looking up can be disorienting. You can also look at it in a full screen view here if you want. So some people have like a second iPad where they'll put this up full screen the whole time, and you can see that here on the right. It's a pretty nice looking view. Our attitude stuff is not just for in-flight, it's also for post-flight debrief. So here you can see a track log of me doing something. It looks like commercial training. Lots of pitching and banking and all kinds of jazz. But anyway, if you're connected to a device that provides you attitude, you can see things like pitch and bank and G-load in the app so you can see what you were doing and how you did. You can debrief those steep turns. Were those really 50 degrees or were they more like 30 degrees, right? You can find out all that stuff after the flight. The big thing to know about this, I want to go back to this slide here. You probably all heard of the dreaded vacuum pump failure, right? The real reason to care about synthetic vision and attitude in flight, or as a backup source like this, is just what I said. It's a backup source, and it's great for if that vacuum pump goes, which we all know has a pretty high failure rate. You don't want to be totally up a creek without a paddle as far as having a source of attitude, and this is a great backup that gives you some extra redundancy if you're doing any kind of IMC flying. But it's not just for IMC flying either. You can use it in helicopter context, low-level flying. Yeah,
if you fly low-level VFR, I find this very, very helpful. For years, I've flown up here to Oshkosh in an R-44 helicopter. Never get above about 700 feet, and so terrain, obstacles, traffic really, really matters there. And it's just, again, to the fatigue point, you can get that information other places. I could be looking at a sectional, I could be looking at maybe a traffic display in the panel, but having that all right there, especially if I have it, you know, nice mounted up in my frame of view, it's really easy to just at a glance know my situation and know that I've got a hill with some windmills over there, I'm not going to go that way. So IFR, no doubt it's fantastic, but I've actually started using this more and more on VFR flights, especially if you're low level, it's invaluable.
You know, one pro tip I'll give you is, we've all had the moment where ATC says traffic so-and-so, and you look outside and you're like, wow, I just really can't find them. I really cannot see them. Well, what you can do is you can open this up here, and we show traffic in synthetic vision here. And you can pretty easily look at it and go, okay, that's where it is on the iPad. That's where it is in synthetic vision. Now let me just look there. Let me look in that quadrant, and it'll really help you find it. You can also do that even if it's not directly in front of you. You can pan synthetic vision and look around the airplane that way for traffic as well. So how do I get backup attitude in ForeFlight? I'm going to be a broken record here. Go back to the buying guide, pages 8 through 10. You see here I've highlighted backup attitude AHRS. You can go down the column and see which devices provide that for ForeFlight. Okay, so I kind of want to move towards finding the right solution. So how do I decide what works for me? Well, there's a number of questions that you should start with. Here's what I typically tell customers. Number one, think about what kind of flying you do. It's not just, are you VFR or IFR, but do you do a lot of cross countries, or do you do a lot of $100 hamburgers, or maybe both, or low level flying like John mentioned. Your flying style and missions that you do really should drive what things you need. The second thing is, what do you already own? What's already in your aircraft? What devices do you already have? It probably doesn't make sense to, you know, get something that you already have. The third is, when is redundancy important to you? And kind of that first question will help you answer that third question. When do you need redundancy? If you're flying VFR, you may not care about certain types of redundancy, whereas you might more if you're flying IFR. All those things come into play. The next thing, and I'm going to hit more on this in a second, is consider the extras. Lots of these devices have little extra features that I haven't mentioned here, little small things, other nuances and things that you might really care about, and that might be a factor. Last thing I'm going to do, again, broken record, point you back to the buying guide. Check that out, read it, come over to the booth and talk to us. We can help you with this. So I do want to take a minute or two to talk about some other extras that you maybe might consider in your type of flying. The three I'm going to talk specifically about today are CO detection. So carbon monoxide, they call it the silent killer. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The next is track logging and debriefing your flights. And the third is, if you're going to go with a portable solution, then you should consider what the battery life or what the whole power situation is, because that's going to be a factor in your pre-flight preparation. So carbon monoxide monitoring. So like I mentioned, you've probably all read in your pilot training, they call it the silent killer because it's odorless, it's tasteless, you can't see it. And there are a number of known cases of issues with carbon monoxide. There's lots of known cases of issues with carbon monoxide. I'm not going to make it smaller than it is. So there are devices out there. We make the Sentry products, and the Sentry products will warn you of elevated levels of CO. Sentry is currently the only product that integrates with ForeFlight as far as carbon monoxide detection. So if you want to see carbon monoxide detection in-app, then you'll need to purchase a Sentry or a Sentry Plus. I do want to show you a quick little video from customer testimonials here about this.
I was a firefighter and a flight paramedic. I was flying with one of my students who also was a firefighter.
A student of mine, he purchased a Cessna 210 and he wanted me to work with him.
My wife and I were returning from Houston area up to the Northeast Texas, Sulphur Springs. I have a Sentry device.
And he had just bought the Sentry. He was bragging about it, how cool it was, and I knew that it could do carbon monoxide.
And that was the #1 reason I got it.
We started getting the CO alarm going off.
We were running around, I think 8,000 feet or so. I noticed that I got a CO alert.
And all of a sudden I saw this notification, and then also the alarm was going off on the Sentry.
My wife was sleepy and drowsy.
I have to tell you, there was no sign of it.
We have SOGs, standard operating guidelines at the fire department. According to our SOGs, also, if anybody was present in the building at that time, we would have to call an ambulance and have them evaluated further due to that high of a level of carbon monoxide. I was shocked by how quickly carbon monoxide can become an issue. The mechanic looked at the plane and
he called me back after one day and said, "Hey, yeah, you got cracks through your manifold, man, lots of them."
Some of the panels underneath were not sealed.
And basically all the exhaust was being ducted directly into the cabin.
It doesn't smell, it doesn't have a color.
It's tasteless. You can't detect it with your natural senses.
Carbon monoxide is so sticky to the blood that the blood wants it more than it wants the oxygen.
If we didn't have our Sentry connected to my iPad and ForeFlight, we would never know.
It made a believer out of me.
I'm pretty sure something bad probably would have happened if we hadn't had the Sentry.
I'll give you a testimonial, Cole. I was flying another Robinson R-44 helicopter on a cold day, and long story short, I had a hole about the size of a quarter in my exhaust. And this is a 4-year-old helicopter. That's not supposed to happen, right? It's the newest aircraft I've ever flown. It's supposed to be in perfect condition. And I had a quarter-size hole in the exhaust. And the only reason I'm convinced I'm here today is because I had a CO detector on board that started barking at me. And my other tip for you is I did what all of you will probably do. What happens? It goes off. God, that thing's always, it's so annoying. That alert, that can't possibly be wrong, you know? And so you silence it. And then the second time it comes on, you think, I wonder if there's really something going on. So fly with a CO detector. If you have a piston-powered aircraft, fly with a CO detector. I think it's great to have it integrated into the app because you're probably looking at it. And if it's synced up to your headset for audio, you'll get an audio alert as well. Highly recommend it. And if it goes off, do something about it. Turn off the heat, open the window, land. Don't ignore it because it's serious. By the time I was done, I had a CO concentration of well over 200 parts per million in the aircraft, which is enough to kill you. So,
John is correct. Usually the story is always the same. It's customer writes in and says, "Hey, my CO monitor, it went off and it's probably broken. I think it was false alarm." And then we say, "Well, you should really go check your aircraft out before we just assume the thing has a problem." And then they email in about 5 days later and say, "Well, I had my mechanic look at it and turns out the hose clamp kind of wiggled its way off." It's usually just post-maintenance. Somebody forgets something, and people are human and mistakes happen. And it is a situation that you need to be aware of and is actually concerning and can be a threat. So we're going to skip past the video. The next one is flight data recording. So some of these devices have flight data recorders on them. So if you record your track logs with ForeFlight, you need to, if you want to have pitch and bank or G-load, you need to have the app always in the foreground to have pitch and bank in your track log. So some devices get around this by recording directly on the device, and it makes it really nice and smooth for you because you don't have to worry about starting and stopping the track log or doing any of that stuff. It just happens. It'll automatically record it, it'll automatically import it next time it sees ForeFlight, and it'll automatically create a draft logbook entry, and it's all just done. There's nothing to mess with. It just works, and it's all integrated. Anything you want to mention on this? I know you've been flying this recently, John.
Yeah, I actually really come to like this. I thought this was kind of a nice to have, but I've started using it more. I did a proficiency flight in the airplane where I did steep turns and instrument approaches and everything. And that goes so fast. It's an hour and a half and you can't even remember it. But to be able to go back in 1G air-conditioned office and debrief a flight, you can really learn a lot from it. We started using it in our flight school a little bit at Sporty's. Good way to debrief maneuvers. A simple one for everybody is look at your traffic pattern. Did you actually fly a rectangular course? It sounds so simple, but we all get lazy on it and don't do crosswind correction on downwind, and then maybe get a little close to the runway, and then you got to turn a little tighter, and you're setting yourself up for a potential problem. So if you get in the habit of regularly debriefing, you can catch those little deviations early. And the way that this works, especially with the Sentry Plus, is it's automatic. It's not a long process. Basically, you just walk back inside and bam, it's there. Sentry Plus automatically offloads the track log to ForeFlight. It shows up on the track logs page, and you can autofill a logbook entry, which is handy because it knows when you flew and what the tail number was. But that debriefing, in just a couple minutes, can really help you stay on top of your game. So I'm a big fan of this.
So we're going to wrap up here because we're about at an hour. So I want to talk about a couple ways to learn more. We talked about a lot of topics here. I want to point you to a few things. Number one, in the ForeFlight app, you can go to Documents, press the ForeFlight catalog, and click the Pilot's Guide. We have written a very extensive guide to using ForeFlight. It covers the entire app, all kinds of stuff. And a lot of stuff we hit on about weather, and traffic and other things. They're all deep dives in there. And what's nice is you don't have to read every single page if you don't want to. You can go to the table of contents and click anything and it'll launch you right there. The next is we have a series of videos at forflight.com/videos. We also have a blog that you can read, and we have release notes and a newsletter. I recommend those options. You can also access a lot of this in-app as well. All the things I just mentioned, if you tap more and then hit the support button, it'll show you this here, and you can view any of that stuff. You can also email us, like I mentioned. Again, we have a lot of resources and pilots available in the company that will respond to you via email and help you out with the problems that you have. So with the time we have remaining, I want to move to a Q&A section. So with that being said, if anybody has any questions, what we'll do is just raise some hands. I'll point them out. You can tell me if it's for you or for me or for John. And Thomas, I'll just let you cut me off when we're done, okay? So I think I saw your hand first there in the blue shirt.
You mentioned something about weather being available nationwide, less or sort of regional, where it was more defined, I think is the way you said it. How do you do that?
Roger. Okay, so the question there is, I mentioned earlier something called regional NexRad radar versus CONUS NexRad radar. So if you, yeah. So with ADS-B weather, with FISB weather, there are two radar products, and there's nothing that you as a user have to do in ForeFlight. We just show them to you both if you turn on the radar layer in the app. But basically what that means is the FAA gives you a higher resolution near the ground tower that you're receiving from and a lower resolution for the whole rest of the country. That's what that is. Good question. Yes, sir. So his question is on the attitude heading reference system, if you do a spin or a roll, will the attitude indicator keep up? The typical answer is no to that. It's not, our backup attitude, our backup synthetic vision was not designed to be a totally inverted aerobatic AHRS. There's a number of mathematic reasons why, but the answer is no. You should not be using the backup attitude indicator for aerobatics.
I will tell you the track logger does work in that case, that you can get a reasonably helpful graph of, we gave a Sentry Plus to Patty Wagstaff and had her go fly it, and it tracks, you know, plus 5 Gs, minus 2 Gs, all that stuff. So from a playback sense, it works, but I agree with Cole, you should not be, if you're in the clouds and you're inverted, use whatever tool you have, but that's not what it's designed for.
And that's typically true of most steam gauge attitude indicators as well, as they will cage when you try to go over most of the time. So most attitude indicators are not typically great in inverted scenarios. But yes, you can use it for a post-flight debrief kind of situation. Any other questions? Say that again, sir, I couldn't really hear you there. XM weather, does it work in Europe? No. So XM is only available in the United States and Canada. Same thing with FISB. It's available currently in CONUS plus Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, Guam. However, I will give you a little bit of a thing here. I'm going to give a shout out to CFIB. There's a Canadian volunteer organization that is working on bringing that to Canada. And there are some trials happening as well in Europe. It may be a few years away, but there are organizations working on that, but not at this time. You're welcome. Yes, sir. Sure, so basically we make that, so the question was, if you have an iPad without Sentry and you see weather, and then you have an iPad with Sentry and you see weather, how does that all work? I think it's kind of a summary of what you're asking there. So the iPad can receive weather over the internet when you're at home, right, for example. That weather, that internet-based weather, should not really be used in flight, because even if you really have a cell connection, it's not very reliable in most cases, especially out west, depends on where you are. But all that weather is coming over the internet and we're showing it to you in that context. When you connect to a Sentry, Sentry is designed to receive weather in flight. In fact, it won't show you weather on the ground. It's only designed to work in flight. And so if you want to see in-flight weather, you should use a device that's designed to show you weather in flight and receive it reliably and stream it to the app. And the answer is, from a user's point of view, is we don't, we just show you the same product. We don't require you to do anything different or select anything different or know anything different about viewing that weather. We just show it to you where we would show it to you when you're at home connected to the internet. Yes, sir, right here.
Track logs, when I make a change in the route, then the track log changes and it eliminates some of the earlier time, unless I'm not setting it there. So if I make a change to my route log, you know, or go direct to, then when I go to the track log, the whole first part is missing, and it starts from where I went direct to.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. That might be something we talk to you about in the booth from a support perspective. I'm not sure exactly what area of the app that this is all happening in, but we can talk about that after. Sorry, I saw you had a hand up back there. Yes, so there are some different, the question is, are the features available in Stratus and Sentry? So the answer to that is a little complicated. The base answer is yes, they both have ADS-B traffic and weather. So as far as looking at ADS-B traffic and weather, all of that will be exactly the same. However, the two devices themselves have different other capabilities. They have different battery life. They have different extra features, like I mentioned, as far as track logging and how that works. Sentry has a CO monitor and Stratus does not. There are some other minor differences, and I would point you to the buying guide, which outlines all the differences of those two products. But the weather and all of that stuff and the traffic are exactly the same. Yes, so the question was, can you connect a Sentry or a Stratus to an external battery to give it some extra battery life? The answer is yes. You can buy an external battery from my friend over here and then connect it to a Sentry or Stratus, and that'll give you some extra life. The good news is we just launched a new device called Sentry Plus. It has an 18-hour battery to kind of obfuscate the need for that external battery, because at 18 hours, if you're still flying, you've probably got some other things you got to deal with at that point. So, yes, sir, in the yellow.
Is the weather that you're showing coming directly from the ADS-B, or is it going through a third-party vendor before it shows up on your screen?
It's coming directly from ADS-B. So we literally take the message from the ground tower and just bam, on the screen. There's no other thing happening. Okay, I'll take one last question and then we gotta go. I saw this shirt here. You should be able to see, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty confident you can see traffic on top of the approach plate if there is ADS-B traffic available at that position. So you should be able to see traffic on top.
The one point would be, make sure you overlay it on the maps page. Don't just look it out on the plates tab. You want to, if you're on the plates tab, send to maps. So it's overlaid on the map, which is awesome, because then you've got your plate, your moving map, your traffic, even your weather. So that's where you want to put it for all that. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. We'll hang around here for a little bit after if there's any other last questions we can answer. Thank you for coming.